Alrighty, so here's the Zoom lesson from today. We talked today about converting between decimals, percents, and fractions. And converting just means that you're changing. So when we're talking about converting, that just means you change between decimals, percents, and fractions. And when you look at these numbers, when we're looking at these conversions, they're all equal. So when you change a percent to a decimal, you're supposed to take the percent sign away and you move the decimal point 2 places to the left. So when I'm changing a percent to a decimal, I've got the number 52%. And when there isn't a decimal in that number, the decimal is always assumed to be here at the end. So if you don't see a decimal point, it's at the end of the number. When I'm trying to change that 52% to a decimal, I take away that percent sign, and then I move the decimal point 2 places to the left. So I move it back 2 places. So when I do that, I have 52%. I moved that decimal point so that it's at the beginning of the 52. That decimal is 52 hundredths. That's how you say that. The picture shows 52 out of 100 little pieces shaded. And so the fraction is 52 over 100. When we talk about the word percent, the word percent has a stem in it that is cent. And the word percent means out of 100. And if you think about cents, like there are 100 cents in a dollar. There are 100 years in a century. So when we're talking about percent, we're talking about out of 100. Same thing with the 7%. So we start with 7%. That decimal point is really after that 7. If you don't see a decimal point, that's where it is. And then we move that decimal point, well, we take the percent sign off, and then we move the decimal point back 2 places. When you move it this place and there's not a number there, we've got to put a 0 in to show that we've moved it 2 places. So we moved it here, that's 1 place, 2 places. So 7% is equal to 0.07, which is 7 hundredths, and that's equal to 7 over 100. And again, 7% means 7 out of 100. So then we did a couple of examples where we continued to do the examples. So we did 98%. And we said, go ahead and change 98% to a decimal. And change 98% to a fraction. So as we were working on that, we said, all right, we've got the 98 hundredths. So we've got, take the percent sign off. The decimal point is after the 8. We're going to move it back 2 places. So the decimal is 98 hundredths. And then that fraction is going to be 98 over 100. And again, that was 98%. Then we also talked about if you've got a number that has like 126%. So again, that decimal point is after the 6. We're going to move that decimal point back 2 places, and then we're taking away that percent sign. So as a decimal, 126% is written as 1 and 26 hundredths. And then remember that this was 126%. And so that means we have 126 over 100. So we did some more examples, and we worked on like 5%. So we've got 5%. We're going to take away that percent sign. The decimal point is after the 5. We're going to move it 2 places to the left. Remember that if I have a spot where I moved it, I have to put my 0 in to say that I've moved it to that spot. So 5% is 5 hundredths as a decimal. And then as a fraction, it's 5 over 100. Then on the back, we worked through just the other way around. So writing decimals as percents. So you've got this decimal of 38 hundredths. You're going to move the decimal 2 places to the right when you change it to a percent, and then you're going to add a percent sign. So when we were going the other way, we took away the percent sign and we moved to the left. When we're writing a decimal as a percent, we're moving the decimal 2 places to the right and we're adding a percent sign. So if we've got 38 hundredths, we're going to move that decimal point 2 places. And then we usually don't show it at the end of the number. So we have 38%, but if you wanted to put the decimal point there, you could. And then remember that 38% means 38 out of 100. So we talked about if you have 76 hundredths, what would that be as a percent? And what would that be as a fraction? So we're going to take that decimal point, we're going to move it 2 places to the right so that it's after the 6. So we have 76, and you could put the decimal point there, but we usually don't. And then I'm going to add my percent sign. And then 76% means 76 out of 100. Then we've got 1 and 4/10. So if I'm trying to move that decimal point 2 places, I move it once, I move it twice. If I move it that second time, I've got to add a 0 in. And now it's at the end, so it's going to be 140%. And then that means 140 out of 100. So we talked about 1 and 25 hundredths. And we want to write that as a percent. And then also write it as a fraction. So to write it as a percent, we're going to move that decimal 2 places. So it's 125, and then my decimal's at the end, percent. 125% means 125 out of 100. So that's my fraction. Okay, then we did an example where we had so we're going to change that to a percent by moving the decimal point 2 places. So now it's going to be between the 7 and the 5. So I'm going to put my 37. I have to put the decimal if it's between the two numbers. I just don't have to put it if it's at the end, but if it's between those two. And then I've got 37 and 5/10%. And then when I write that as a fraction, that means 37 and 5/10 out of 100. We're going to do one last problem where we have 67 hundredths. We're moving that decimal 2 places to the right. So that gives us 67%. And then 67% is 67 over 100, or 67 out of 100. So I'm going to write these decimals over here because I want to make sure that you have those clear without the little marks that I was moving. And this one is. So those were my decimals. That's where I moved the decimal point. That's my percent. That's my fraction. All right, we'll do the last 2 pages on Thursday.